Hey y'all, what's up? My name is Lynae Vanee, and welcome to the People's Brief. Okay. This is a place where real conversations are going to meet real solutions, where deep, layered context is going to cut through the noise, unpacking the issues that affect our community and inherently the world around us. Where I'm still going to keep it black, but now, luckily, I've got more time. So if you came to this show from my Instagram series, Parking Lot Pimpin', thinking you were going to need that subtitles option locked and loaded, cool your jets. Unchap your khakis. I won't be talking a mile a minute, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now, we begin our journey with you here on the People's Brief 5 years into the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. Floyd was a 46-year-old father, a son. He was family, he was community, and furthermore, we cannot stress this enough, he was minding his business when he was killed by Minneapolis police in 2020. But he nor his death are just a plot point on the timeline or a tent pole in Black history, so we felt it was only right to honor his legacy, to analyze the impact his death has had on millions, and shine a light on the equal and opposite reactions working to cancel that very impact out. Floyd's death sparked a movement across the world in the midst of a global pandemic. While COVID catapulted us into a drastically different new normal, there were still protests in every major city and demonstrations across several continents. The corporate sector made bids on Black, then walked them back just like that. We got Juneteenth as a federal holiday. There were pushes for more African American studies to be taught in school. Seems like everything but stopping the state-sanctioned police violence we asked them to stop. Make it make sense. Now, let's see what else is new here. That boom of diversity, equity, and inclusion, gone, quick and fast as it came. That CRT business set ablaze, which is crazy to me because nobody was ever talking about putting actual critical race theory in class. You know, the class that's literally for lawyers, that's only offered in law school. Why would it be for the kids? But once again, here they are making things up to find more ways to say Black without saying Black. So to say any of this is new is crazy. Because if we're being honest, the so-called reform in response to that feral display of criminality Derek Chauvin put on that day did not have any real legs. It was marketed as if it did, but things like this never do. Think about it. Throughout history, whenever the federal government has attempted to offer some wide-sweeping atonement for racism, you know, like slavery, the civil rights movement. Hold on now. I'm trying to think, but those might be the only two times. Shoot. And that's because it's always a performative gesture, a determination of how many rights we want to give the Blacks this time around. But I say all that to say, those of us who have been studying the ebb and flow of racial progress in this country knew this was coming. The backlash, the pulling the rug from underneath the feet, all of that. We might not have known how long it would last, and the people electing Donald Trump twice certainly wasn't on my bingo card, but hey, once again, here we are, 5 years later. Now to help me dig into all this Raggedy Ann behavior, we have some special guests joining us tonight. 2024 Webby Award winner and historian Garrison and podcast host, activist, and TV personality Miss Angela Rye. After that fateful day in May of 2020, the world felt it was necessary to at least pretend to become a better society. Why? Because everybody was at home, watching. We saw a grotesque display of entitlement to Black life for 9 long minutes, and it reached at the heartstrings for most people with a pulse because there were no everyday run-of-the-mill distractions or business as usual readily available to overshadow what we saw. COVID beat out the head distraction in charge, capitalism, and would you look at that? People started to care again. But it wasn't just Black people this time. So many mothers across races answered the call. You know exactly what call I'm talking about. And when the non-Blacks get mad, things start to move differently. And the timeline of events of what took place since May 2025 of 2020 is a doozy, but you've heard enough out of me. Garrison, talk to him.
It's been 5 years since George Floyd was murdered. The day was May 25th, 2020, and Floyd, a 46-year-old Black man, was arrested for allegedly using a counterfeit $20 bill in a Minneapolis, Minnesota grocery store. During the arrest, Officer Derek Chauvin pins him to the ground, kneeling on his neck for over 9 minutes. George Floyd loses consciousness during this ordeal and is eventually pronounced dead at a hospital. The footage of Floyd's death would arrest the attention of the world. But the global protest movement it ignited was so much bigger than any one moment or any one person. It had been building for centuries. And to understand that moment and the months of protests that followed, you would have to understand the cascading momentum of history bearing down on it. The theological malpractice of the curse of Ham, the greed of the Middle Passage, the indignity of slave codes and slave catchers. All of that was housed in our protest, even if we did not know it. The reality is that most of the world knew very little of that history. What most people knew was that a man died on camera while crying out for his mother, and that there was something profoundly wrong with that. It was so wrong that it moved millions to participate in the largest protest movement in modern history. In the moment, I'll tell you, it felt like the world had changed. But 5 years later, many of us are left asking whether it changed for better or for worse. I think the last 5 years can be understood in 3 distinct periods: an awakening, a retrenchment, and a third category that I think we are entering into right now. So I want to look back at the last 5 years to better understand what happened, what we can learn, and where we go from here. Let's start with the awakening. The day after George Floyd's death, protests erupt in Minneapolis, and by nightfall, they've spread across the US. By May 28th, the world responds. From London to Lagos, from Anaheim to Atlanta, tens of millions of people take to the streets in their respective countries under one banner: Black Lives Matter. The names of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor are chanted alongside George Floyd, not just as individuals whose lives are deserving of respect, but as representatives of something much larger. By June 2020, then Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Cory Booker proposed legislation to curb police misconduct, to end chokeholds, to ban no-knock warrants, and to limit qualified immunity. It was an all-hands-on-deck kind of moment. Books about Black history shoot to the top of the New York Times bestseller list. Corporations like Target, Bank of America, and Amazon pledge hundreds of millions of dollars toward racial equity. For many, this felt like something special, a true awakening. And all of that momentum is poured into the 2020 election. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, carried in large part by Black voter turnout, are elected president and vice president of the United States. But this is also where things get complicated. Police reform bills get nowhere in Congress, blocked by Republicans and stalled by conservative Democrats. Derek Chauvin is found guilty of murder in April of 2021. But at the same time, a new protest movement is rising in response to 2020. It's smaller and perhaps quieter, but far more organized. Its goal is to remove woke and CRT from classrooms. And even though CRT, critical race theory, is a legal framework barely taught outside of law schools, by mid-2022, more than 30 states had introduced anti-CRT laws limiting how race, history, and inequality could be taught in public schools. But the attacks don't stop there. Over the next few years, American politicians and media figures would leverage anti-Blackness to target affirmative action, DEI, and Black participation in nearly every sector of society. In 2023 alone, dozens of states break ground on multi-million-dollar police training facilities. By 2024, the political landscape has completely shifted. Anti-woke backlash is entrenched. And in November of 2024, Donald Trump is reelected, carried by an undercurrent of replacement theory politics and racial resentment. Within his first 100 days alone, he ends police misconduct investigations, throws out civil rights enforcement, and signs an executive order to give military gear to local police. His supporters even call for the pardon of Derek Chauvin, the man who murdered George Floyd. I'd say that all of this is shocking, but to be honest with you, it's exactly what he campaigned on and exactly what his most vocal supporters wanted. Which brings us to today. What's clear to me 5 years later is that while the country may not have changed in the ways that I hoped, that we hoped, becoming more just, more equitable, something changed in us. George Floyd's death and the rise of a global movement, followed by the backlash and re-election of Donald Trump, shifted something in our collective consciousness. I think it ushered us into this current period, a time of reevaluation, a time of reimagination. MLK once said that those who love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those who love war. The truth is that those who love to wage war on Black people, our bodies, and our communities communities. Those people have been very effectively organized. The conservative majorities banning Black books are organized. The conservative media apparatus shaping public opinion is organized. But, and I know that this is crazy, I still think that there is ample reason to believe that better is possible. People like Gary Chambers in Louisiana are building electoral power, organizing Black voters to turn out and block a tough on crime constitutional amendment in the state. Angela Rye, Joy Reid, and others are on the road with the State of the People Power Tour, educating and empowering communities to create real change. And shows like this one, hosted by Lynae Vanee, exists to build real media power in exactly the moment we need it the most. 5 years later, Black people are reevaluating and reimagining what it means to build structural power for ourselves. So if the question is what changed, the answer is that we changed. Our strategies changed, our methods changed. But I am hopeful now more than ever that the lessons of the last 5 years have been valuable, that they will be instructive as we build something for us, by us, something that will stand the test of time. Back to you, Lynae.
My next guest is, in her own words, an empowerment tour. She's a lawyer, an activist, a thinker, but more importantly, she's a doer. And she just so happens to be my close personal friend, Miss Angela Rye. Hey, girl.
Hello, hello.
Thank you for coming to Brief the People with me.
I'm happy to be here, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, we've spent this episode commemorating the 5-year anniversary of the death of George Floyd. And I just want to know, 5 years later, given all the context, how are you feeling?
Ooh, I feel like we went backwards. You know, there was a lot of change that happened right after George Floyd was killed, and I always think about his daughter saying, "Daddy, you changed the world." And to see the type of significant change we saw in the months after his death, to the visceral reaction, the response, the insurrection in 2021 to where we are now, it's unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of folks warned us. I think especially some of our forebears, some of the elders that said this is, you know, whatever you're experiencing with white allyship and that kind of thing is not forever, because anti-Blackness is still alive and real.
Yeah.
Seeing that every day more and more. So it's sad.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I definitely feel like I felt that struggle with hope during the last election season. Like, it was right there. It felt like it was pushing me and riling me on. And when that fell through, I didn't know how to feel.
Yeah.
But I've really still been trying to embrace hope as a strategy instead of resilience. That doesn't make me feel like a person. And I just wonder how you're handling hope right now.
I feel more on the resilience and perseverance side of the spectrum than I do on the hope.
Okay.
Although I do feel hope when I look at the coalition that we're building and how we're growing, even how we now engage, which we really didn't before. That's something that we didn't have before the election.
Yeah.
And so the hope that I have is in, you know, bright, shining stars like you, having platforms like this to teach our people, educate, empower us. But that also comes from resilience, from not being deterred, from not accepting what they're putting out, saying, no, we're actually going to show up differently. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go to all the protests, but maybe we're going to go to this coalition meeting, or we're going to go and rally our people, like what we're doing with State of the People.
Yeah.
But
and tell us more about that, because you hear a lot of people saying what we need. There are a lot of talkers, and there are not a lot of doers. And you hear a lot of people saying what we need. We need a new civil rights movement. We need new leaders. We need a new version of Malcolm X and Martin. And I just wonder what we really need. And I say that because the times necessitate very specific things.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we will be productive trying to find singular individuals to take the lead. And I wonder what you feel like the actual strategy we should be going after is.
You know, I so believe that models teach us a lot of what we need to know. And what I mean by that is, there was a time in the 1800s where Black folks met every single year. They convened mostly in the church, mostly in the AME church actually, to talk about a very singular agenda. It was freedom. We got to a point, obviously, where we were at least released. I don't know that we ever really have realized freedom. But we got to a point where we stopped doing that as frequently. And then the one that I always go back to in modern history was Gary, Indiana, 1972, the National Black Political Convention. So I love this model because Black folks had delegate representation from every single state. And they came together around an agenda that when you look at it, and I know you're a history buff, so when you look at it, that agenda is not much different from what we need now. Our needs have increased, but really, like they were talking about DC statehood then. Yeah, Black family and the dynamics then, like economic empowerment then, fair wages then. So much of what they needed then is what we need now.
Yeah.
And I think that where we really miss the mark is we go in and tell our folks what they need to be doing without ever asking them how they feel or what we need. So what we need, I think, is part of the strategy.
Yeah.
Like, how are you gonna have people to lobby and coalesce around a collective agenda if you haven't bothered to ask them, what do you need?
Yeah.
How can I meet that need? And so one thing that I think is incredibly dope about State of the People right now is every time we have a need, there's somebody there to meet it. So it's like, I feel like God is trying to show us that we have everything we need. So I wake up every morning now and I'm like, God, we have everything we need. I thank you. Like just even in the back, I was like, we need some iPads for this registration tomorrow because I don't think they thought about it. Somebody in the back was like, my friend got iPads. I'm serious. Like it's just that simple.
And it's like that.
Yes. So
Yeah,
we go
when
from
you're aligned.
overwhelm to overflow, and it keeps happening that way.
We love an overflow.
Listen, hey,
Yeah?
hey, listen.
And I love that you were talking about meeting needs because something we were just talking about in the back, some of my old students actually are helping me with this show.
I love
so full
it.
circle moment. But something that I learned teaching is that nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. And I feel like that's such an important message to institute in every single thing that you're doing, especially when you're trying to get people to come to the table. And I know this, the reason why I started the parking lot is because I felt like people did not want to feel like they were being hit over the head or preached to about their responsibility as descendants of our ancestors. And so how do you incorporate making sure people know that you care in your messaging?
No, I mean, and first of all, kudos to you because you absolutely nail it. I think that there are still people, and I'm learning this, it's a tough reality because I think I pride myself on being a translator. Like I can take something that's complex politically and break it down and make it digestible. But child, if you go to the hood, you get humbled real fast. Because they're like, who are you? They don't know. Like they're not necessarily watching. Our channels aren't even in their algorithm. You know what I mean? The channels where I'm on air, they don't even see. That's not what they're watching. And that's not everybody, but it's too many of us. So who are the messengers for them who they feel care about them? You know, whether it's Killer Mike or it's Leonard Charlemagne the God or whoever. Like who is the person that speaks to them because they also deserve a messenger. So that's the thing. Like I know that I'm not for everybody. That's all right. And I think that what we need to understand is we've got to equip the people who are their messengers with the right information.
And so if you could have like a dream team, 5 people from any industry,
Oh, you're
who
not
would
about
you
to
want
do
to
that.
see?
No.
Who would you want to see sit at a table with you to reach as many people as possible?
You know who my dream team is are people who are not already in my circle, who I can't already reach, because then I know I will learn something new and different. Whether it's about my approach or how we can collectively approach something, the thing that I want the most in this moment is to reach people who I never could. It truly, because I'm like, our math ain't mathing. Like we can't keep talking to each other. We've got to go and get the few. And I'm gonna be honest with you, at 45 years old, I don't know how to do that.
45.
Yes, ma'am. But you know, like I'm saying for the first time, I really don't know. I'm willing to do anything I can, but I'm not confident that I know how to do that. So I wanna get better. I want us to get better, to tighten up. We'll be like, okay, we need to go do something new, and then we'll default right to the thing we know. And that's not wrong. We got to give each other grace, but we can't say we're not meeting the moment. It's abnormal times, and then go back and do everything that we would normally do. It's not normal.
And I just want to say for anyone out there listening that the moment hasn't changed. Like I'm just saying, these aren't unprecedented times.
You don't
this is
think
all.
so?
Okay, are they amplified? Yes, but I'm saying the same, just like you said earlier, the things that were on the agenda in 1972 are still on the agenda now. Like the issues remain the same.
I think they're going about it a little differently.
Okay.
Like, I feel like we're almost in an era now where somebody, like, at any moment now, I'm expecting some white person to walk up to me, be right here, and say the N-word in my face and feel like there's no consequence. They're arresting judges. They got children representing themselves in court with no other legal protections.
Yeah.
They deporting people to countries they didn't come from, like, en masse.
Yeah.
They used to do it before, like, a little bit here and there. These people are crazy. Like, I feel like the insurrectionists that were in the Capitol on January 6th are now running the government. So to me, I'm not saying that there have never been these people
Yes.
and that it wasn't suppressed.
Yes.
It's like now they loud and proud with it.
I agree with you.
You know?
No, I'm 100% we're on the same page, but I guess what I'm saying is this was bound to happen because the issues that have been underlying have yet to be addressed.
I agree with
and
that.
to your point of always needing to make sure we're engaging in strategy, we can't wait until things look super bad to then say, oh, we have to do something. The issue is, I think we feel like because we've been told our history has only happened in spurts, or the moments that we get to shine are only 15 minutes of fame here and there, that we don't understand that our struggle, I don't always like to use that word, but our movement has to be consistent and sustaining and long-term, period. And so even past this moment, we can't think about change and strategy in our approach to just getting someone out of office or, you know, it literally has to, these people have been making Project 2025 since 19 what?
This is a 40-year plan.
40-year plan.
They just renamed it.
40-year plan.
Yeah.
You know?
And we don't have one.
And I don't want to be the one to say we need our own 40-year plan, because it's not always as simple as combating or being reactive. We just have to ingrain strategy and sustain strategy within our very fabric. Like, there has to be a mindset shift, and it cannot escape us the very moment our everyday seems to feel like the norm that we're okay with it being.
You said something so good earlier, though. You were like, we have more talkers. And I think that part of the reason Black folks have more talkers is because it's this trauma response. We're used to not being seen or heard. So the response is to be loud. The response is to speak. The response is to make sure that I'm platformed. It's not necessarily to do the work. And I think one thing that white folks do well, I'm not even saying the other side anymore, because if you're not with us, it's white folks. It's just what y'all doing.
Whiteness, for sure.
Right. So if they will play their position, right? There's somebody that's really good on data. There's somebody that's really good on strategy. There's someone that's really good as a talker. There's someone that's really good on funding. They will play their position. For us, we want to be like, who is the line leader? Who is the person that's out front? Not realizing that those movements, even when we bring up Dr. King, was sustained by people like Bayard Rustin and others who were plotting and planning. He was just a part of it. They had labor support, you know, with A. Philip Randolph. They had Diane Nash. They had all these other people who were playing their position. And I don't know how they got to comfort. Maybe they never were comfortable in those roles, but they still played those roles. So we at least have to get to our folks to the point where it's like, yeah, we're in crisis again, and yeah, we're responding in crisis again, but how do we make it more sustaining? How do we endure? And we can't endure if it's only reacting in a crisis.
Agreed. And I'll just wrap us up by saying that I also feel, to give the talkers a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, is that a lot of us don't think that we actually can do anything. And a lot of us see the actions of doers and protests and things like that, and when we get back in spots like this, maybe because they weren't involved, maybe because they didn't see the Diane Nash or the Bayard Rustin, they don't understand that change can actually and effectively take place. And I just want to empower us to be in more community, to join coalitions, and be a part of the fight so you can actually see the effects of the work on the ground. And while that's all we have time for right now, if you want to see more of my conversation with Angela Rye, you can watch the People's Brief online to hear the full talk. Something that truly sets the loss of George Floyd apart is that no facet of life was left untouched by the tidal wave of social responsibility that hit us in 2020. But what we saw happening in the world, the timeline of events, the checks that did not clear, the backlash politically and socially, were all exposed by the media. And I don't know if you're hip yet, but right now the media is under attack for that very reason. In 2020, 9 long-suffering minutes on our TV screens, on the screens in the palms of our hands, revealed to the rest of the world what Black Americans know to be routine. And I think we can take a beat here to give everybody a little refresher and name some other names. After the trifecta of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor, there was also Rayshard Brooks. Since then, we have also lost Elijah McClain, Tyree Nichols, Jordan Neely, Sonia Massey. It is impossible for us to name all the names, especially when more often than not, with the frequency of these killings, we are far more likely to remember the circumstances instead of the people. However, each one of these names, along with George Floyd, gave the media outlets an opportunity to cover not just police and state violence, but the American lore that has allowed them to persist. In the past 5 years, across genre, television dared to speak more openly about race. And I'm not gonna hold you, it's because we were given permission to. The trendiness of advocacy cracked open a window, and not knowing how long these invitations would last, we rolled in as much fresh air as we could. Documentaries like the 1619 Project, Stamped from the Beginning, Summer of Soul, Let the World See, Who Killed Malcolm X, and Black Barbie, just to name a few, compounded on the movement to open people's eyes. And that's why a show like this is so important. Unapologetically Black TV hosts, commentators are being fired, deplatformed, even doxxed in a movement to stamp out Black voices and pull the covers back over the eyes of those afraid to deal with what America is actually doing. Why? Because the powers that be understand that the media plays such an important role in cultural consciousness, that it was the primary vehicle that inspired and facilitated so much change in these past 5 years. And I'd like to reiterate that once again, it had so much power because all of us were at home, unbound by the typical distractors of life, unfettered by the demands induced by busyness that makes us forget that we're all in this together, Black, white, in these continental United States and abroad. So does it make sense to you now why the current president of the United States is making it his business to eradicate work from home culture? What kind of miserable oops, let me find it. You've got to be more miserable than Ebenezer Scrooge, Mrs. Trunchbull, Mr. from The Color Purple, and Paulina Pritchard from The Fighting Temptations to want to put a stop to Americans achieving a healthier work-life balance. But that just goes to show that anybody can be on the short end of the stick, that at the end of the day, the concepts of oppression and systemic injustice were never just an anti-Black thing. Up until now, the worst of it, or at least the stained effort of it, has just had a primarily Black face. And what the rest of folks are learning now is that this country will literally turn its back on anybody the moment it becomes convenient. That Blacks have seen the worst of it, the Latinos, the women, the poor, the queers, and now everybody seems to be getting on board. And by everybody else, we may mean white women and a few of their men's, but that's why we made this show. That's why we're here 5 years later, doing our part to continue lifting the veil. So, never miss a beat on the People's Brief. I'll be back next week with more time.